Namaste. हमेशा खुश रहो बिटिया. I am JVWU Dr. Lily Trivedi from JAYOTI VIDYAPEETH Women's University, and I am going to take the lecture of BSCBED 4 SEM. Course is Anatomy, Ecology and Evolution, and the topic of today is plant succession. Now, in plant succession, we are going to study ecological succession. So what is ecological succession? It is defined as an orderly process of changes in the community structure and function with time mediated through modifications in the physical environment and ultimately culminating in a stabilized ecosystem which is known as climates. So this is a basic definition, and what it tells us how one community is changed or replaced by another community over a period of time, and so that a finally stabilized final community is there, and which is known as climates. Now the whole sequence of this community which is changing is known as serial stages or series, and the community which established itself first is called the pioneer community. Now let's start with the different stages of the ecological succession. Now the first is starting in a watery area like pond, swamp or bog. Then second, that is called hydrarch. And the second is mesarch, in which is starting in an adequate area which has adequate moisture. Third is xerarch or xerarch, which is starting in a dry area with little moisture. Now it can be either on a bare rock for lithosphere, on a sand called samosphere, or on saline soil which is called halosphere. Now what are the process of succession? How it takes place? Now it is taking place in a systemic order with the following steps in the right sequence. Now what is the sequence? The first means nudation. What is nudation? It is development of a bare area without any life form. And what are the factors which are responsible for nudation? It can be either caused by landslides, volcanic eruptions, or due to drought, glacier or forest, or due to biotic factors like overgrazing, disease outbreak, industrial or agriculture activity. So this is the first stage, nudation. After nudation comes invasion. What is invasion? It is successful establishment of one or more species on the bare area. Through, how can it be? Through dispersal or migration, followed by establishment. Another name for this is accesses. Now dispersal of seed or spores can be brought about by wind, water, insects or birds. When these seeds germinate and grow on the land and they start reproducing, they are called pioneer species. And when they increase in number and form groups. The third stage is competition and coaction. Now what happens over here? As the number of individuals grow, there is competition by both interspecific, if there are two or more species, or intraspecific, if there is same species. So what is the competition? For space, water and nutrition. And they influence each other in a number of ways, which is known as coaction. The fourth stage for the succession is reaction. Now, as the living organism, they are using water, nutrients from the substratum. They are influencing the environment, and which is modified to a large extent, and this is known as reaction. And the modifications are very often, and so that it becomes unsuitable for the existing species and favorable for some new species. And when the new species are growing more in number, they start replacing the existing species. And this reaction leads to several several communities. Now the fifth or the final stage is stabilization. What happens in succession? Ultimately, it culminates in a more or less stable community which is called as climate. And this is in equilibrium with the environment. So the climax is how it is characterized. Now it is characterized by maximum biomass, which is symbiotic linkages between organisms and maintained quite efficiency uh, through per unit available energy. So this is a characteristic of climate. Now let's study some two types of succession. First we will study hydrosphere. Now what happens here, the succession starts in water like a pond, water body like pond. The intermediate stages come and ultimately the climax community is a forest. Now what happens here, the pioneer community which is consisting of phytoplankton and they are free floating algae, diatoms, etc. Now they are gradually replaced by rooted submerged plants, which are again followed by rooted floating plants. Now when these plants die, they keep adding organic matter to the substratum. And what happens? The, the decay and death of these build up a layer of soil and shallowing of water. The pond starts constricting or it starts becoming less deep and then starts the reed swamp state or the marshy state in which the plants are partially in water and partially on land. Then this is followed by sedge meadow stage of grasses, followed by woodland stage consisting of shrubs and trees, and finally the forest, which is the climax community. So this was about hydrosphere. Now let us take some other example, that is xerosphere. Now what happens here, the succession originates on a bare rock. Now there is no water and organic matter in the rock. So the climax community of xerosphere is also a forest. So this is very interesting. Now what happens here, the pioneer community here consists of lichens, the crustose and foliose lichens. Now these lichens are producing some weak acid which helps in disintegrating the rock, and this process is known as weathering. Now their growth helps in gradually building up organic matter, humus and soil. And finally comes the community of moss. Now lichens are replaced by mosses and mosses will be replaced by herbs, shrubs and finally the forest tree. So this is a very gradual process and very slow buildup of organic matter and water in the substratum. And therefore this xerosphere is moving towards Mizar condition irrespective of the fact. Now every succession moves towards Mizar condition. Now whether it's starting from xeric or from hydric condition. And the final community is usually a forest. So students, I hope you have understood my lecture and I hope you have found my digital session interesting. And if you have any query, kindly comment in the comment section and I will resolve it soon. This session was powered by Digital Version 2.0 JAYOTI VIDYAPEETH Women's University. Thank you and Namaste.